Hello, welcome back to CS170. We're in week 5. Just wanted to do a couple of admin stuff and then we're going to kick off with our flowcharts. So I think there was a few questions coming up about some things that we can do better, or feedback I should say. So one of them was around organization of the media gallery. So I am updating the Excel spreadsheet that shows all of the different columns for the week, the chapter or the topic that's covered, and the link for it. And remember last time I was saying like the link somehow gets changed over time in Media Gallery, but I think these links should be stable now. But we'll keep an eye out on it. Make sure that if it changes, I'll update the sheet. But one thing that I did was I went into the media gallery and I created playlists. And when this thing comes up, I'll be able to show you. Let's see here. Taking a long time as usual here. Okay, so if you see what I've done here, if you go into the media gallery, you can see I've organized by week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so hopefully that groups it logically, so you figure, oh, I need to catch up on some lecture. You can go to one of these playlists. You can look at them as folders, right? But you could also click here and you'll see all of them. And then when you do this, you click like this in the detail view, it'll order it in order or relative order. Sometimes the timestamp's a little bit off, but it should be mostly in order where the most recent video is up at the top. Okay, so you can look at either one of these and this should be helpful. The other things, there were some questions about office hours and whatnot. So I wanted to just suggest that if you want to get a hold of me for some office hours, just like send me an email and I'll just make sure I'm available. I have the time to meet up with you. We'll create a WebEx room or a Zoom room, whatever. And we'll go through whatever you need to do. Okay, so I find that works out a little bit better than me just kind of having some time on a Friday and just having some times blocked out. You know, it's good. You just give me a heads up, and then I'll just make sure we have an agreed time, and then we'll do the office hours. Okay. The other thing I want to go through on the modules here. Number one, you can see the pseudo reference guide, which you can also see if you go further down. Same thing. Right, so you can see this pseudo reference guide here, and you can see flowchart symbols. Okay, and I'm going to flip over to the flowcharts in a second, but let me open up this PDF here for the flowchart symbols. Okay, again, this is similar. Let me do a zoom here, see if we can get this bigger for you. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And I'll show you some of the examples in a second. So there's only a few shapes. I know sometimes you go into like some of these editors, flowchart editors or whatever, and they kind of give you a whole bunch of different shapes and whatnot. And it just kind of gives you more granularity about the different ways to describe the different things you're doing on the flowchart. I would say don't really mess yourself up with that. Just stick with the simple stuff here. So these basic shapes, you should be able to do all the flowcharts that we want you to do for the class. And you can see some examples here, right? I'm not going to go through these. You can look at these on your own. I'm going to go through the examples in the PowerPoint. And usually we're kind of okay with it. I'm going to point out a couple of things with the flowchart, and we should be okay with it. Probably what's going to happen is as we get into the JavaScript, I'm going to break out more examples of that. But do feel free, if you can't follow these examples or the ones I'm doing in the PowerPoint, then just let me know. I'll create more video clips for that. I just kind of figured it'd be better for me to focus on the JavaScript a little bit later on and have more videos around that. Okay, so let's go back to flowcharts here. So again, you're limited. Like to try to limit yourself to these few shapes here. And really, what are flowcharts? The last lecture we were talking about algorithms, right? So you can have a recipe or something like that, right? Um, and a flowchart is a good way. A lot of people might use a flowchart to describe something, organize your process so that you can take the next step to translate that into a programming implementation. So you program with it. Okay, so flowchart basically takes a process instead of me just kind of talking off the top of my head and talking about a process. It kind of organizes it. Okay, so you see this oval shape, right? That basically tells you that it's the start of the process, right? Or the end, okay? And then these arrows is basically the flow, right? So you start, there's going to be an oval shape, then there'll be like an arrow that comes out from it. And it goes to various things, right? Usually, remember we were talking about algorithms, you're going to be taking some input, right? So usually you're going to have some input coming in, right? Maybe it's a keyboard, you're typing in some stuff. Maybe it's like some data that's stored in memory locations. It could be on secondary storage. You remember we were talking about secondary storage. It could be like the hard drive or some like USB stick or something like that, memory stick. So that's what these parallelograms are. Okay, and then likewise, after you're done with the calculation, there's some output coming out. Maybe it goes to your screen. Maybe it goes to like another file, goes to memory, it goes to something on a hard disk. Whatever it is output. So that's what these parallelograms are. There's like the stuff coming in, and then there's the stuff going out. Okay, and then you have the process. So it could be like, let me calculate the average of some numbers, right? So my input was some numbers, and then the process was to do the calculation of it. And so you're not going to, I guess it depends on, how low you want to go, but generally you're not going to sit there and say, well, okay, I'm going to take, number one, number two, number three, add them, and then divide them by however many numbers there are. You could. So it depends on how low level detail you want to get with the process. Okay. Then you have a decision, right? So a decision usually is like two choice, right? Um, so it could be like, is it red? Is it black or white, right? And then um, so then it will make a choice, right? Let me show, it'll come to you in a bit of a second when I show you this, okay? So this kind of just reiterates what I was just saying, right? So you have to start, which is one line out, right? So you have one line out, and the end you have one line in, okay? And then the input-output process is one line in and one line out. Okay, and a decision is one line in and two lines out. Okay, so you'll see this in a second when I do an example of what all this means. Okay, oops, pseudocode. We'll cover some of the pseudocode stuff also. So it's just kind of just writing things out to describe like you were a computer processing it. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's say there's a flowchart here. You're going to a website. In this case, they're talking about Facebook. So there's some I/O, input output. I/O stands for input output. Um, and you're going to process or load in the login page. Okay. Once you have the login page, you have the I/O there. And then the user is going to type in the ID and password. Again, that's I/O again, right? So just imagine this, right? You typed into a browser. There's like stuff coming to you over the browser. It displays that login page. That's all input output, right? And then you're going to type in your password, okay? So now you're going to validate the password, right? So now this is where a decision comes in. You say, is it valid? Okay, is it a valid password? Actually, it's if not valid. So it's not valid, you're going to get an error, right? And then you'll just display the login page with an error message. If it's a good password, if it's a good ID and password, you'll find the user's homepage and display the homepage. So that's I/O again. Okay, so let's scroll down to here. So this just reiterates what I just said in the last page. Okay, so let's start with that. Okay, so here's your start. All right, every single flowchart has to start with this oval shape. Okay, so that's your start, and then you have one arrow out. Remember, we were saying this has to be one arrow out, right? And here's your parallelogram. And remember, we were saying parallelogram is your input output. There's one coming in, one coming out, right? So in this case, your input is going to be punching in the URL. Okay. Uh, Now you're going to be doing a process, right? So once I typed in the URL, the computer is going to go away and do something, right? At least from what you see, it looks like the computer is churning away, doing something. It's going to be loading in the login page, okay? Now, again, another output. Now, once I got this login page, it's going to come out and display on your browser, right? So again, this is another input-output thing, one line in, one line out, okay? Um, Now, again, you remember we were talking about your I/O input output. Now that you have the login page, you're going to punch in your user ID and your password. Okay. Now, when you come back to here, say, okay, now is the password good? Is the ID and password good? All right. So here's your decision uh, shape here. So you have the one arrow coming in and you have the two arrows going out. So it's either good or it's not good. Right? So let's say it's not good, right? Bad password or something. So it goes out to here, and then you have some sort of processing to say login error. Maybe it just says, yeah, bad login or something like that, right? So it just quote unquote calculated or processed some error message, right? And then here, you remember, parallelogram. This is going to be your input output, right? One arrow in, one arrow out, and comes back here, and you'll basically end up to the same input where you're going to be asking for the user ID and password. Okay, so this is a little bit vague on how it handles the login error, so I think we're just trying to keep it simple here. Uh, Theoretically, this handle login error could actually branch off and do a lot of different things before it kind of just comes back here, right? But if you ever log into Facebook, you'll probably see it flow like this at the high level of detail. Um, so for example, like maybe if I have 3 failed login attempts, I'm going to lock your account, and I'm going to force you through some other process to try to see if we can recover your password or something like that, right? So this is just very simplistic to just say, oh, it's going to display error login message and come back up to here for your input. Okay, but I'm just saying that we all probably know that you've probably seen it yourself, right? You forget your password a few times, you log in a few different times, you fail, different things will happen, right? Most of the time it'll just lock your account, but there could be other things. But let's say you're over here, you pass the login test, uh, so yes, right? So you can see the yes here. So make sure it's very clear on the line, right? See the no here and the yes here, that you're going to come out of the decision shape with, and then you have to load the home page. To load the home page, that's a process, right? So it's going to search its database for your info. It has probably like its template that it will feed into to display your home page, right? So that's the process, right? The actual display of your home page, again, it's an input output, right? So this is an important point, right? Don't just go from here to your display. Something has to happen before you do the display, right? You have to get the info, maybe you have to populate a template, whatever that is. That's part of this load homepage. And then you get the display homepage, that's your input output, and this whole login process is done, right? And so that's why you have this arrow to end, okay? This is kind of a simple view, and you'll see some other situations where you could be tempted to do something different than these like arrows. Be very careful with that. That's something that um, the class professors are very strict on, right? So you'll see what I mean when I get to some of these different types of flowcharts. It's very strict about these. To be honest, there's like not that many different rules here. There's not that many shapes here, so I think it's okay, right? So pay careful attention to this. Don't draw like extra arrows here. Sometimes people go in here and then they end up like coming up with like essentially like a case statement and having like, you know, 10 arrows coming out of your decision shape. That's really going to get you dinged. So, you know, we've seen that happen in exams before and other assignments. That's going to get you in trouble. So, you know, take it seriously when they talk about these rules here. Did I skip it here? Yeah, see, start, one line out, one line in, the one line in, one line out, and one line in, and always two lines out. See, it's even bolded here. Okay, so do pay attention to that, right? I know there's always like a lot of grappling with this, trying to get partial credit when people diverge from these rules. Don't do it, okay? All right, so quick thing. I mean, probably a lot of you probably know how like these conversions go, right? Last class we talked about conversions for numerical analysis, numeric conversions, right? But you know, this is temperature change. So Fahrenheit to Celsius, and you can also do the other way around too, right? And then there's another one for calculating your given hours worked and pay per hour. So I think I'm going a little bit longer than I normally do for short video, but let me just finish with these two examples, okay? So here's the formula, right? Your Fahrenheit temperature minus 32 times 5/9 equals your Celsius temperature, okay? Um, this is your JavaScript calculation here. Don't worry too much about that for now because I'm focused on your flowchart. We'll worry about this JavaScript in my next lecture. Okay, so again, remember this start shape. I don't really know why they chose to use a different color from this oval to this oval, but it's fine, right? So we'll do the start oval shape, note the end oval shape, okay? And then here's your IO, here's your input, here's your parallelogram. So you're going to input the Fahrenheit temperature. Once I have that, I'm going to calculate Celsius equals to this. Basically, it is F minus 32, 5/9. Once I have that calculation, out comes the output, and then you're done, right? Nice and easy, right? Now we're gonna do. You can have your hours worked, and then your pay per hours. Okay, so again, here's your start, here's your end. We're gonna get your hours and your pay rate. Okay, and then of course your total pay is gonna be your hours times your pay rate. And then it's going to be doing your output. Note, very similar to the calculation for your temperature conversion, right? All looks kind of the same, right? So then you have your output for your total pay and then your end. Okay. Now they just add a little bit of a twist here and say, okay, what about overtime? Okay. So you have your start. I'm going to do my input hours, pay rate. So if I did over 40 hours, yes, right, that comes out here, and you got the little line, and you put the yes. Then you do the total pay, a little bit extra calculation, right? So you have your 40 times your regular pay rate, and then you have your total hours minus the 40, which should be your overtime, right? And your overtime is basically going to give you time and a half, right? 1.5, okay? Boom, right? If it was a no, basically it's the same calculation from the prior page where you have the total pay times the hours. I mean, not the total pay, the hours times the pay rate. So the hours times the pay rate. So that's basically the same calculation. So we just added like a little bit of a twist here if you did some overtime, right? But then they all kind of come together here into your output pay, your total pay. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. We'll be stepping into JavaScript for your next lecture. Okay, again, for the flowcharts, if there's like anything that you're not seeing from the PDF under the modules or the examples I just did, just let me know, and we'll crank out a few more video examples for that. But I kind of figure I want to spend more videos doing JavaScript. Okay, thank you, and we'll catch you next time.